Our story left off last time where the third owner of this car had sold it to somebody and the car disappeared and nobody really knew what happened to it after that. Well, I was talking with Danny Johnson and he did recall reading something about this car. He remembered some details which were also part of the carport story, and that's what I had known about the car, but there was actually something more. We had talked about the car and what happened to it, and he said that he remembered some details about this car having been for sale again, and somebody went to look at it and they were really unhappy with the condition of the car because the owner was asking a lot of money for it, and the owner wasn't really selling it as a internet famous car during this time. He was just selling it as the Cobra. He said, yeah, there is a video about it and here are the pictures. And so what happened was the guy who bought it after this lived in Washington State. So the car went up to Washington State and he had it for a while, and he had posted the pictures in his sales ad that were these pictures taken of the car from the second owner. So some people were skeptical that he even had the car or if it was a scam or what it was. It was on SVT Performance, and there were a lot of people talking about it, commenting, saying they really wanted the car. It was kind of the same story as before. This is getting really interesting with this car, with how much the car comes up for sale, has a whole lot of interest, and then all of a sudden the seller disappears again. And this time it's a different seller. But it's really interesting how much he has in common with the previous seller of the car, where he has it for sale and he gets all this interest and then he just stops talking to people. This actually makes the story incredibly interesting, and it's something like the original Bullet, where we had talked about before, the original Bullet and how it was similar to this. But the original Bullet was owned by a person who didn't want anyone to know he had the car. He kept it real hush-hush. He hid the car. And he wouldn't give anybody an opportunity to even see the car. And it wasn't that drastic in this case, but it was an interesting situation where all these people said, oh, I'm interested, I have the money, I want to see it, can I set up a time? And there was nothing from the seller again. So some people on SVT Performance on the thread, the sale thread for this car, were getting really bugged about it, and they were all talking amongst themselves and saying, you know what, I don't think this guy even has the car because there's no pictures of it besides the ones that were taken from before. The guy isn't responding to anybody, and the moderators had to get involved on the website. They said, well, it shows that he did log on at this time and that he's been on the website, so he is active. Whoever this person is, he is in here. Well, eventually, somebody else said, I found the car listed for sale on Craigslist. And the car is in Washington. It's the same pictures, same everything. And the guy is trying to sell it locally. For some reason, he doesn't want to talk to anybody on SVT Performance. So in a really weird turn of events, somebody on SVT Performance contacted him through Craigslist, started talking to him, and he found out that he was claiming that the car was low on power and that there was something wrong with it, so he took it to a local college that had a dyno shop, and they dynoed the car and it only put down 400 to the wheels. And it wasn't like the car was hurt, but there was just something wrong with it. And so the seller goes on to say that he figured it out later that there was a boost leak and then the car made power again, so all was well. But he didn't like dealing with the people on SVT Performance. And so he had some guy go up there and look at the car, and he later told this to people on SVT Performance. He came active again on his own sale thread and said, okay, I've been absent from here, this and that. And the moderator jumped on him and said, I don't like sellers like you. You hold people up. You don't seem to be very serious about the car. You make it really difficult for other people. And the guy got real defensive and said, look, I've had a bunch of people message me, tell me they had the money, said they were going to come visit. Nobody showed up. And then I put the car on locally, and then I had some people come and finally show up to look at the car, and he was really upset about the situation where a young guy came with his girlfriend to look at the car, and when they had already agreed on the price of $22,000, and they got there and started looking over the car, and this kid started noticing that the paint was really scratched up, probably because it was under a cover under the carport in Texas. He said the trunk liner was all torn apart and twisted, and the plastic liner in the trunk was all broken up, and that one of the wheels was curb rashed really bad or dinged or something. And there's just a lot of stuff wrong with the car that was not in the sales ad. In his ad, he said this car is pristine. He said that the car was as close to perfect as it could be for a 12-year-old car. At the time, it was 12 years old. And so the buyer, the younger person who came up there, was kind of upset with the condition of the car, and the seller was really upset with him, and he got ticked off really easy. The buyer claims that the seller got real mad, slammed the hood, slammed the doors, shut the car all up, and told the guy to have a nice drive home, and told him to leave. And so it was real interesting how that all played out. Of course, this is all hearsay, he said, she said kind of stuff on the forum, on the sales post. But people were saying that there are a lot of problems with this seller who he didn't really seem like he wanted to sell the car, or he was being very, very picky about it, and if anybody gave him any trouble whatsoever, he'd shoot him away. But these pictures were posted of the car from the seller, and it was the same car. You can see the roll cage and everything in there. And so people calmed down once they saw actual pictures of the car, but the seller just got really defensive of the car and said, you know what, I will keep it. I'll drive it for another 50,000 miles, then I'll sell it for 15,000. I don't care. He had some money, he said. He claims in his post that he had $200,000 worth of cars in his garage, and that this young kid should have been able to look at that and realize that he's not trying to pull one over on him. The seller's point of view was that there was this trust fund kid who came up with his girlfriend, tried to lowball him, tried to change the sale after they had already agreed on it, nitpicked the car, and it made him mad, and so he took it off the market again. And he even told the people on SVT Performance to disregard the thread, and he's not going to sell the car anymore. Now, the moderators on the thread had said, no, we're going to leave this thread up so that people will see it, so that if somebody goes to buy this car, they know what's going on here. Now, another interesting thing that happened with this car, which muddied the water even more, was the Carfax report. Some people were saying that there were discrepancies in the Carfax and that it had an odometer rollback issue, and that was the next thing that needed to be resolved. And the seller of the car did come forward with some paperwork, and he showed this. It did show that the first owner purchased the vehicle with 9 miles on it in 2003. And then the next recorded mileage was 102,928. And that would have been when the second owner had it. And then there was another entry of 20,000 miles, 590, and then 32,254. And so you can see, if you look at that, it's real easy to see. 9 miles should have been 10,200 miles, 20,000 and 32,000. Now, if you have a New Edge Mustang, or if you've ever seen the cluster on one, you know how easy it is to get this wrong. Take note that on the odometer, there is a 0 where the 100,000 mile range would be. But at first glance, the mileage can be difficult to read. In this case, this is the actual car when the third owner was selling it. It had 28,013.4 miles on it. And it would be real easy for somebody to look at that and think that it said 280,000. And I think that's exactly what happened when the second owner bought the car. Somebody had recorded it somewhere at 10,200, and they accidentally wrote it down as 102,000. So you can see how that would have been. So that second entry there should have been 10,292.8 miles. But it was obviously a miscommunication, it was a typo, it was a problem. And so unfortunately that caused trouble on the sale of this car. There's just so many things that are going wrong with the sale of this car. It's very interesting. But the truth is, it's the right car, the VIN number matched, everything was in line. But the seller was getting ticked off with the people who were coming to look at the car or all the interest it had. It should have been a really easy car to sell. So there was a bunch of back and forth between the seller and all these different potential buyers and moderators, everybody on SVT Performance. There were a whole bunch of things going on there. The kid who had gone up to actually visit the car and who did see the car talked to his dad on the phone. His dad said, "You should offer less because it's not what he said it was." And so the kid tried to offer him 20,000 even. The guy turned him away, told him to get out of there, and that was the last time anyone saw the car, as far as I'm aware. That was the last time anybody talked to the guy in person. On the forum, on that sales post, there was some back and forth. Somebody else said, "I'll give you 20,000 right now for the car. I understand that it might not be perfect. Would you take 20?" And the guy never answered him. And I tried messaging the guy just to see if he still had the car and the whereabouts, and he hasn't answered me yet. And so anyway, I'm not putting his name out there. I'm not trying to trash talk the guy, but it is interesting that people take selling and buying totally different than other people do. It's real hard to determine how people are thinking and miscommunications and things like that. But the guy who had seen the car, he also mentioned the third brake light was cracked, which is very common on these cars, and then he talked all about the different problems and blemishes the car had. So we know that the car was still around. It still had some things wrong with it, which, I don't see those as major things. Like the trunk liner, you could go to any junkyard, go get a V6, tear out all the interior out of the trunk until you found a pristine one, because I'm sure there are plenty of them out there. You could have got all those pieces and it would have been real easy to fix that. So I think that's being a little bit picky. The scratches from maybe a car cover, things like that, I could see that upsetting people. But overall, it's a really awesome car, and it kind of has disappeared. Again, if anybody knows where the car is, if you own this car now, let us all know. Put it in the comments. I think that'd be really neat to know. And maybe the fourth owner still has the car today, and maybe he's going to hold on to it, and maybe it will go up in popularity and demand because of the internet and everything. But anyway, little update on that video, part 2. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you're not already on here with us, and stay tuned for more Mustang stories.